there's bad news and there's good news for Shedeur. The bad news is that the owner, I believe, despite what the owner said, Jim Haslam, I believe he drafted Shedeur.
Yeah.
All right. It doesn't make sense for the Browns to draft two quarterbacks that they realize both of them are projects, right? Draft two quarterbacks. Now they got to keep four. All right. So I don't think Stefanski and Andrew Berry, the GM, and I don't think they really like having Shedeur around. I'm not saying they don't like him as a person, but I think they feel maybe a I'm just reading what I'm seeing.
What you're saying
I feel like there's a little resentment there because it's like now we got to develop this guy to some degree, and it becomes a circus because of who he is and his last name. So I think that's the bad news for Mike. I'm seeing for Shedeur. The good news for Shedeur is that the owner drafted him. Because the owner is like, I want to see what this guy can do, all right? And we know they're going to start Joe Flacco. They're going to lose a lot of games early. And then they'll probably go to Dillon Gabriel first, I guess,
yes.
Right? He'll go first. And unless he's electric.
And here we go, another Sunday, another firestorm in Cleveland. The Browns kicked off their season against the Bengals. And while most fans were locked in on Joe Flacco struggling to move the ball and the defense giving up big plays, the real conversation wasn't about the scoreline. It was about Shedeur Sanders, the rookie, the fifth-round pick, the quarterback with the famous last name, the one Cleveland fans are split right down the middle on. Did the Browns mishandle him? Did they flat-out sabotage his debut NFL moment? Or is this just the brutal business of football where nobody cares about your pedigree, your name, or even your preseason highlight reel if you can't deliver in the heat of the regular season? Here's the thing. Shedeur didn't play in Week 1. Instead, fans watched Joe Flacco look every bit like a placeholder, Kenny Pickett sit on the roster as the emergency option, and Dillon Gabriel slide in as QB2. Meanwhile, Shedeur was inactive. Healthy scratch. Watching from the sideline as the Bengals' defense battered Cleveland's offensive line. And the more you watched Flacco go down under pressure, the more you wondered, if Shedeur was under center, would the Browns have looked any different? Or is this franchise dead set on keeping him buried? Let's rewind to what Nick Wright, Chris Broussard, and Kevin Wilde said not long ago. They called out Cleveland for strange decisions in the preseason, pulling Shedeur late in games for Tyler Huntley, who isn't even on the roster anymore. They said Stefanski and Andrew Berry never wanted him. That the only reason he's even here is because Jimmy Haslam, the owner, forced the pick. Now fast forward to this Bengals game. Doesn't it feel like history repeating itself? Doesn't it feel like the Browns are bending over backward to not let Shedeur get a fair shake? When your own team treats you like a burden instead of an investment, how are you supposed to succeed? Broussard laid it out months ago. Shedeur should have gotten more first and second team reps, more chances to run a 2-minute drill, more time to prove he could actually operate with NFL speed. Instead, what happened? The Browns treated him like a side project, a nuisance, a PR stunt they had to tolerate because the owner said so. And let's be real, this isn't just about football. This is about name, narrative, and pressure. As Broussard said, the circus around Shedeur Sanders is unlike anything most late-round rookies deal with. Every practice throw, every preseason snap, every sideline shot, it all gets magnified because he's Deion Sanders' son. Coaches don't like distractions. And it's obvious Kevin Stefanski has viewed Shedeur as just that, a distraction. But here's the twist. That Bengals game? That ugly, plodding, uninspired loss? It made Cleveland look like a team desperate for fresh energy. A team that could use a quarterback with Shedeur's raw talent, even if he's not fully polished. And yet, the Browns buried him on the depth chart. Flacco first, Gabriel second, Pickett floating in limbo. Shedeur? Stuck. So I'll ask you, do you think the Browns are protecting Shedeur until he's ready? Or do you think they're actively holding him back because Stefanski never wanted him in the first place? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear if you're team patience or team play him now.
There's been a lot of nonsense said about the league as a whole having, you know what I mean? They sent the code red to not draft him, and now that Kevin Stefanski is actively calling the bad plays for Shedeur, which I think is an opinion held by dumb people. So here are the things I believe to be true. I wrote them down. I have a list like Brew does sometimes. Number one, there was not a league-wide anti-Shedeur conspiracy. I think that's ridiculous. Number two, I do think he has more talent than Dillon Gabriel, but I don't think for the job they're trying to win, which is backup quarterback, raw talent is the deciding factor. I think readiness is, and it does appear right now Gabriel is more ready. Even though he practiced poorly, he played better in the preseason than Shedeur did. Number three, I don't think Stefanski ever wanted him.
Let's talk about that resentment. Nick Wright said it plainly, he doesn't think Stefanski ever wanted Shedeur. Think about what that means. You're a head coach preparing for a season, you know you'll have to invest time into grooming a rookie, and you're okay with that, as long as it's your rookie. For Stefanski, that was Dillon Gabriel. He expected to pour his energy into molding Gabriel into a serviceable backup. Then boom, Jimmy Haslam drops Shedeur into the room. Suddenly, Stefanski's workload doubles. Suddenly, the cameras are at camp every day, asking about Dion's son. Suddenly, you're being asked in press conferences why you're not giving Shedeur more snaps. That eats at a coach. That builds resentment. And resentment doesn't disappear. It seeps into every decision. So what happens? Shedeur gets thrown behind a third-string offensive line in preseason, looks shaky, takes 5 sacks, and the narrative becomes, see? He's not ready. But who set him up in that position? Who made sure he wasn't working with starters? Who decided to yank him before he could finish a 2-minute drill? That wasn't Shedeur's call. That was coaching. And after all that, Nick Wright hit Shedeur's biggest truth. When you're a late-round pick with a famous name, you don't get the same grace period as others. You don't get to play bad and shrug it off. You don't get to develop quietly. Every mistake is an indictment. Every bad series is fuel for the haters. The NFL doesn't care about your name. It cares about what you do when the lights are on. So when the Browns rolled into Week 1 against Cincinnati, who did they trust? Flacco, the veteran who, let's be honest, looked every bit his age. And Gabriel, the rookie Stefanski actually wanted. Where does that leave Shedeur? Inactive. On the shelf. A pawn in a front office versus owner tug-of-war. But here's the million-dollar question. How long can Cleveland keep Shedeur Sanders on the sideline before fans demand change? Flacco isn't the future. Gabriel isn't the future. And we all know Kenny Pickett's not the answer. Shedeur represents something bigger. He represents hope, excitement, and yes, a marketing circus that the Browns ownership craves. So let me ask you again, do you think Shedeur gets his chance this season? Or do you think Cleveland drags this saga out until the offseason only to shop him for a late draft pick? And here's where things get spicy. Because Broussard wasn't shy about it, he flat out said Shedeur Sanders should have been a first-round pick. Let that sink in. He's sitting on a desk, saying this kid had first-round talent, and yet the Browns snagged him in the 5th. That's a massive gap in perception. And it creates a bigger problem. When you go late in the draft, you don't get treated like a priority. You don't get treated like a long-term project. You get treated like a flyer, a lottery ticket. That's why every snap Shedeur takes matters. It's why every preseason series was critiqued like a playoff start. And it's why Saturday night's poor showing, combined with Week 1's benching, feels like a crushing setback. Because fair or not, when you're a late-round pick with a famous last name, people expect fireworks. And when they don't see them, they get cynical. They start using words like bust or overhyped. The NFL doesn't just test your skills. It tests your patience, your reputation, and your ability to survive politics you can't control. Nick Wright called out those politics directly. He shut down the conspiracy talk about a league-wide code red to not draft Shedeur, but he admitted Stefanski's attitude toward him is obvious. This isn't paranoia, it's reality. Stefanski wanted Gabriel, not Shedeur. And now, it's showing up on the depth chart. It's showing up in Week 1 against Cincinnati. It's showing up in the way the Browns are handling this entire quarterback room. Let's look at that room. Flacco, Gabriel, Pickett, Shedeur. That's 4 quarterbacks on a 53-man roster. That's rare. That's unnecessary. And you can't tell me that doesn't feel like an organizational mess. Broussard said it himself, now they gotta keep 4. And when you're juggling 4 QBs, someone's always the odd man out. And right now, that odd man is Shedeur. So here's the big fan question. Do you think the Browns should trim this QB room down to 2 and let Shedeur step into the backup role? Or do you think they'll keep dragging out this 4-man circus until the owner forces their hand? Now, let's circle back to that Bengals game. Because if you watched it, you saw exactly what the critics warned about. Joe Flacco doesn't move. He doesn't escape pressure. He doesn't buy time. He's a statue in the pocket. And against Cincinnati, that meant sacks, stalled drives, and frustrated fans. Meanwhile, the thought lingered, Shedeur Sanders may not be perfect, but he moves. He creates. He can extend plays. And in today's NFL, mobility is survival. But instead of seeing Shedeur, we got more of the same. Flacco grinding through, Gabriel holding the clipboard, and Shedeur inactive. And the Browns wonder why the fan base is restless? They wonder why people accuse them of submarining Shedeur? It's right there on the field. Sometimes the worst thing you can do to a rookie isn't playing him, it's hiding him. Wright made another point that deserves attention. He said Shedeur's biggest fans might actually be hurting him. Think about that. The louder his supporters scream, "Play him now," the more pressure Stefanski feels. The more questions he has to answer at press conferences. The more resentment builds inside the building. And who pays the price? Shedeur. A rookie who didn't ask for this storm. A rookie just trying to prove himself. And it's true, Shedeur can't afford another bad outing. That preseason game where he lost 41 yards on 5 sacks? That's stuck. That stat lives on. Fair or not, that's the NFL for late rounders. One mistake can label you. One game can change your career trajectory. Do you think Shedeur's fan base is helping or hurting him right now? Are they giving him confidence? Or are they making him a bigger target inside his own locker room? Let's not forget, Wright also broke down the brutal depth chart reality. Flacco's the starter, for now. Pickett's floating as trade bait, but still ahead of Shedeur. Gabriel's already climbed above him because he fits Stefanski's mold. That leaves Shedeur staring at a redshirt season, healthy scratch after healthy scratch. And that's the irony. The only person who seems to want him in Cleveland is the owner. And in the NFL, ownership power can only take you so far. Jimmy Haslam may have forced the pick, but he can't call the plays. He can't set the depth chart. That's Stefanski's job. And Stefanski has made his feelings clear. When your boss wants you, but your coach doesn't, how long can you survive? So here's what might happen, and tell me if you agree. Flacco struggles. Gabriel gets his shot. If Gabriel looks electric, Shedeur waits even longer. If Gabriel falters, then maybe, just maybe, Haslam steps in and says, "Put my guy in." And that's when Shedeur finally gets his chance. But by then, will it be too late? Will the Browns already be out of the playoff race? Will the locker room already be fractured? This is the dangerous game Cleveland is playing. And it's not just about wins and losses. It's about identity. It's about whether they see Shedeur Sanders as part of their future, or just a distraction they hope quietly fades away. If you were Shedeur, would you want to stay in Cleveland? Or would you want the Browns to trade you to a team that actually believes in you? And here's the kicker. Wright ended his rant by saying something nobody wanted to admit. There's not a single team in the NFL right now where Shedeur would walk in as a starter. Not one. And there are only a handful where he'd even be a clear backup. That's the reality. And yet, at the same time, this is how late-round picks make it. They fight uphill. They scratch, they claw, and eventually they break through. And I'll tell you this, if Joe Flacco keeps losing, if Gabriel shows his inexperience, the Browns will have no choice. Shedeur Sanders will see the field this season. Maybe not in the way he dreamed. Maybe not with the full support of his coach. But he'll play. Because in the NFL, ownership almost always gets what it wants. You can bury talent for a while, but eventually, the game has a way of forcing it onto the field. So buckle up, Browns fans. This story isn't over. In fact, it's just getting started. The resentment, the mishandling, the circus, it's all part of the Shedeur Sanders saga in Cleveland. And whether you think he's the future or just another overhyped rookie, one thing's undeniable: the Browns cannot escape the storm they created. And I'll leave you with this. Week 1 against the Bengals was ugly. Flacco looked old. Gabriel looked like a placeholder. Pickett looked unnecessary. And Shedeur looked invisible. But the one thing the Browns can't hide forever is the fact that Shedeur Sanders isn't going away. And that's the truth from Gridiron Insights. Do you think the Browns are sabotaging Shedeur Sanders? Or are they just being cautious with his development? Drop your take below, because I know this fanbase is divided. And if you want more raw, unfiltered NFL breakdowns like this, controversy, drama, and all, make sure you hit that like button, smash subscribe, and stay locked in with us here at Gridiron Insights. Because trust me, the Shedeur Sanders story is only just beginning.